Thank you. It being 7 o'clock, I would like to call the meeting to order of the August 2nd Wolfeboro ZBA. This is a work meeting tonight. We have no cases. For roll call, I'm Audrey Klein. I'm the chairperson. Luke Freudenberg, vice chair to my right. Tim Cronin, clerk to my left. Suzanne Ryan to my right. Sarah Silk to my right. Alternate Dave Senecal at the end. Tavis Austin, town planner, and MJ Shelton, recording assistant. We have quite a few things to go through tonight. So I guess we'll just kick it off. We don't have any unfinished business that I'm aware of. Yes.
Microphone.
Would that be the 3 sets of minutes, the unfinished business?
The order of business puts that at the bottom. The order of business that's in our ZBA rules of procedure.
Yeah, I just thought maybe we should take care of them first because we could wander in the discussions.
True.
Just a.
Suzanne Ryan has said she needs to leave at 8.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference as to whether we move the minutes ahead?
Oh, no, I'd do them last. I don't care about the minutes so much. Unfinished business, if I may. Probably 3 months ago, I had asked for a discussion about our rules of procedure. I like to call them bylaws. I had offered to work on them with anybody that wants to work on them. I don't know if we could have a subcommittee to put together some suggestions. I had worked on them before and didn't get too far with them, but I had done the towns of Bedford, Greenland, Northampton, Durham, Ossipee, Stratham, and Hudson, and picked out the best and left the worst of them, and tried to put something together that was suitable for Wolfeboro and our needs. So I've got to start. I'd like to get the blessings of the board to have 1 or 2 of you come work on it and get something in the next month or 2 together. I don't know how anybody feels about it, but I think some of the problems we're having and some of the issues are because we don't have a structured system here. And the bylaws or rules of procedure do 2 things. They help the applicant to give them guidance. They help us, and then they're out there for the public to see too. So I think I was woefully lacking. How does people feel about that?
Well, I think we need to go through them. Yes, I think there's probably changes that can be made, and I'd like to see the change proposals that you're making and anybody else who's interested in it. I don't know that a subcommittee is the way I would go with that, but how does everybody else feel about that? My inclination would be for us each to identify what we think needs being changed, share that information with everybody so they could look into it and then have a board discussion on the items.
I think we should, if we're going to work on rules of procedure, should definitely make it a work session because our meetings are pretty jam-packed, and I think we need to be able to put our attention on that when we're going to go over it. I don't think it's good use of our time to, go page after page after page in a meeting. I think it's a better idea for people to look at them and come in with things that they'd like to have changed and share that with the rest of the board and discuss it.
I agree with Sarah on that. Suzanne, can you give an example of something that you find that's in the rules right now that you'd like to see changed?
Well, I didn't come prepared to do a presentation, but...
Or just one item.
Well, for example, the cost for notifications in the newspaper, The site visits, the things we've been having troubles with, they're spelled out in other towns' bylaws, how to proceed with those things. And, you know, that's a couple. Then there's always the standard thing about timeframes and stuff like that. But I wasn't prepared to try and tell you the things that I think need amending or adjusting or added. It wouldn't be taking things out, it would be enhancing what we have. But I don't care how the board wants to do it, but it's got to be done, I think.
Luke, do you have an opinion?
I agree with Suzanne. I think that, and I think it needs to be done in an open format when we're all here, you know, anything that we can do to facilitate these meetings operating smoother and the applicant having more information ahead of time so they come here woefully prepared to present in a meaningful way, and that they know the procedure that we're using. And I think you've been very clear in the beginning about describing each situation, variance, exception. But I think that needs to be laid out. I think this is the whole reason for this meeting tonight, is just so we can iron out how we facilitate better meetings for the applicant and for the board, so that we're not here till midnight anymore. So I'd like to see, I mean, those were both examples that I think we're going to talk about tonight, the site visits. I mean, that's something that we've struggled with. And also, you know, for me, you know, having the, you know, if we're going to approve X, then this is the motion. These are the 5 or 7 points that need to be made along with the motion in order to fulfill the application. I think that is very useful information. I think we're going to discuss that shortly here, but I think that's a great start. I'd like to see, I mean, you've obviously spent a lot of time looking at those other towns, so I think that's, you know, if we can take the best of all the towns around and, you know, and work it with our own, and as long as it comes down to making things smoother and facilitates these applications getting in and then getting out of here in a reasonable amount of time, I'm all for it. So, but I think that's what tonight's for. So.
Right. From that standpoint, I guess I'm not completely knowledgeable about what the various issues we've been talking about, which one of those belong in the rules of procedure and which one of those are just kind of operating decisions that we've made to do. And I guess a third category is instructions to the applicant, which don't belong in the rules of procedure, but need to be gone through, cleared up, and put in a way that we know that we're getting that information. So there might actually be 3 separate things that we need to talk about.
But by virtue of the rules of procedure, you adopt the application process. It will be stated in your rules of procedure referencing the applications and the application process. I don't care how we do it, but we just got to do it. If you know, it's a lot of work to try and put one document together that collates a lot of these different towns. And that's why I thought if somebody would help, then we could do it, and then we come in with something, and then we all bang it out. But for 6 of us to sit and go through line by line, word by word, we'll never get it done.
I agree with what Sarah said. If you have a specific item, bring it forward and we review it. But I think that anything that should be looked at is not only what the applicant has to do, is what we have to do here, because these meetings are drifting so far off base with a lot of the questions that are happening of the applicants that have nothing to do with their applications. It should be pretty cut and dry. I mean, the last case we had last week with the deck, the 4 or 6 foot deck, that was so easy to do, and we spent an hour on it putting these guys through hell.
Audrey?
Yep.
Yeah, we have flow charts. I have zoning handbook that I got, and it's not updated because it's 2013, because I've been on the board that long. And I think we all could benefit from having these updated. But in the back of it were flow charts, which Rob Hausman worked on for an unbelievably long time before he got them finished. But I'm not even certain that people are even using them anymore.
They're not very complete. I mean, they lay out some large steps, but they are part of the process that the people should be following, yes.
Right, but I also have questions that don't appear on those flow charts. You know, who is it that actually puts the packet together and actually sends it to the newspaper? Is that
Right.
the ZBA secretary? Is that Terry? Is that Tavis? Who does that? Who makes sure that the packet is
So
complete?
can I just interrupt you? Because I think those are the kinds of things that we were going to talk about tonight.
Okay.
Is that would be one like subject, completely apart from what we're talking about rules of procedure. So I would say that we do need to schedule a work session specifically for the rules of procedure, and that everybody should take a look at them and see how they think they might be made better. There's also obviously an outline in some of the New Hampshire Municipal Association books about what should be in the rules of procedure, and ours actually follows it pretty closely. So I would say that we need a meeting just for that, and then tonight we can talk about some of the information items that we might be wanting to know about. Does that make sense?
I don't have time August and September. I have extra hazardous waste things. I'm going to be gone for over a week and all. I have no objection to working with Suzanne or looking at it. It's just I can't do it this month. You know, if maybe I could get together with you in September.
I'd like to make another comment. I've been doing this for 26 years on the Zoning Board of Adjustment or Appeals. It's always been that the planning department has the guidelines of what the applicant should put together. If there's something missing, isn't that something we mentioned to Tavis? But I mean, we're jumping into his lane right now, and that's their responsibility. Ours is to hear the thing when it comes here. The person gets up, the person makes their case, they go through their 5 items. We either agree or disagree. And these things shouldn't take 5 hours or 6 hours a night to go through. I don't think it's fair to the applicants or to the people that are on the board.
So my understanding of what the hearings are is we sit here and we ask questions to get information from the applicant and anybody else that would like to speak. And from that information, we pull out the information that we feel is very relevant to the case, and we make our decision based on that. The applicant is presenting, this is very much like a courtroom, they're presenting one side, and their attorney is presenting their case to the best they possibly can, and they're not presenting anything on the other side. This is why we need to ask questions of both parties. Yes, the last couple were very long. They were complicated cases. They were not simple cases. Yes, they did go a long time. The applicant had a lot to say, and the abutters had a lot to say, and it's our job to listen to that.
I mean, I'll give you an example. I believe in constructive criticism, so this is not a personal.
I do not take it personally.
No, good. On the boat museum, when you're questioning the young lady up there, what kind of sailing classes she does there and what kind of boat she used, that had nothing to do with what we were hearing that night. Absolutely nothing. And you drug her through the mud, and I just don't think it's right, where even the attorney that represents him had to stand up and object to it.
Well, you know, we're here to listen to whatever they want to say. And lots of times it's the public that drags it out. And your point about it had nothing to do with anything. We had an application, I don't know if David would remember this. Guy was a nice guy, lived in a modest home, I don't even know where, but he wanted to have permission to put a small addition on, and he needed an adjustment to the setback. And in his application, he said, one of the fifth thing, the hardship, he has to feed his birds. He has to feed his birds. He has to put the bird feeder somewhere. I mean, it was the saddest application I've ever seen, but, you know, I mean, people don't understand, so we have to sit here and just be polite and just suck it up, you know? So there's a lot of things that don't apply, and hopefully we ferret it out in our going through our 5 criteria. And I know if we have to be here till midnight, and I didn't want to be here any more than anyone else, then we just have to be here.
I think these were kind of unusual. I think it's the first time I've ever seen an application come in for 3 different procedures in one meeting.
Right.
And more than one of those. We had
Had
two
2 in a
special
row.
two administrative appeals, 2 special exceptions, and 2 variances scheduled in one night.
I mean, one other thing that, when these people come in front of the board and they're filling out this application and they want a special exception or a variance on a zoning setback, I don't think it's necessary every time that you read the statute to the entire group of what a special exception is and just drag that out. They're here for a reason. We all understand it. I mean, it's
The public
So are you
doesn't know.
objecting to the 30 seconds it takes me to read
more
what
than,
that is?
I am, yeah, and it's more than 30 seconds.
So let me tell you why I'm doing that. I'm doing that because the master plan is asking for education in the ZBA process, and I'm doing it not just for us or for the audience, but for the people who are watching on DCAT. And I think it's, I'm taking the 30 seconds to do that very intentionally, and I appreciate you. I hear you saying that you don't like it and you don't appreciate it.
I don't think it's,
and
no.
You don't think it's necessary?
I didn't say I don't appreciate it. I said I don't think it's necessary.
Okay. I feel that it is necessary. Would you all like to take a vote and have me, decide whether you'd like me to have that in the beginning or not?
I think the public sadly doesn't understand what it's all about. And maybe at the very beginning of the meeting, you could just say, this is what a special exception is, and go through your spiel, and this is what, we don't often have appeal.
Well, hopefully, we won't have each one every night, and I was
Right.
really only going to say my paragraph on whatever it happened to be that night, whether it's a variance or a...
But people just don't understand. I can remember when I ran for this position, someone that was also running was campaigning that he was going to get rid of this and that and something else. And the audience had no clue that the items that he said he was going to change if he got the position are state law, that he is not personally responsible for changing at the local level. And so it is really a lack of education out there that I think sometimes does need to be addressed.
Audrey,
Yes.
David just offered to help me with the procedures.
Okay. I'm afraid you're going to put a lot of work into redrafting the whole thing, and then we're going to want to make significant changes to that. That's my only concern.
I guess it's a point of view. Either you want one page or you want specifics. I'm one that likes black and white. I like specifically what is the...
Right. I don't want us to get blocked in either. For instance, this discussion we're having about whether we start new cases after a certain time at night, if that's in our rules of procedure, we can't change that. And
Yes, you
I don't
can.
think
If you
that's
put a
good-
waiver provision in, you can.
Okay.
See?
Thank
So
you for
that-
letting me know
see?
that.
See, so this is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Let us hand in a document, and then if you want to shred it, shred it. I don't know how David feels about that, but hand it in. I mean, look, we're beating this. It's 20 minutes past 7, and we can't even get a decision about whether the full board wants to take and go through 5 towns and go line by line and put in what they want, take out what they, or do you want us just to put in a document and do what you want with it?
I think everybody should put forth their suggestions, and then we just review the suggestions. And if you and Dave work on it and come up with, we think this, and this should be in there, then everybody should get a copy of that before
Well,
the
that's
meeting.
of course, yeah.
And then Audrey can put in her suggestions.
Well,
Tim
that's
can
what,
put in
I'm not saying
his,
to
and
adopt whatever we give
Right.
you. You take it home, digest it for a month or whatever, and
Yeah.
then go to those towns, look stuff up, and see what you'd like in it, or not. Let's just do something.
Can we go back for 1 second? There was, maybe I misunderstood, but meetings that are called after 9 o'clock, it's in the guidelines that we don't start?
No, it's not.
Did I hear that right,
It's
or-
not in any guidelines right now, but some other boards will say, we're at 10 o'clock, we're going to finish the hearing we're in, but we're not going to start any new ones that are on the agenda after 10 o'clock.
I
That's,
think, yeah,
And,
I look
and
at,
you can avoid part of that problem by looking at how many people you have when you make up your agenda. And maybe it's necessary, I know you have to respond within so many days, but maybe it's necessary to talk to the applicant and say, look, we don't look at hearings after 10 o'clock, and we have X number of hearings coming up on our next meeting. There's a good chance that you may come at 7, sit for 3 hours, and not get heard. Would you prefer waiting till the next meeting? Or perhaps if we have that many, perhaps we should schedule a second meeting that month. But there are ways to respond to the public and do your best to take care of their cases in a timely manner, and yet not abuse them by having them sit here for hours and hours and either give them some type of a decision that's made because we're all in a coma at midnight.
I mean, I look at
The
it,
the planning board does it. Our planning board, I believe, does it. They have, sometimes they introduce that we'll start no new applications after a certain time. I believe they do. So,
I look at it that you have families out there that are going through this process that they want to do something with their property, either an addition or construction or whatever. And when you just say, okay, that's it, 10 o'clock, you're gone, they've got to now wait another month. The builder has to wait another month. You're putting off these people because it's an inconvenience to us. And to me, if you have to stay till 3 in the morning, you do it to serve the public.
Well, I worked on the Board of Selectmen for many, many years. 2005, 6, and 7, I think, was when we used to get out at midnight or 1 o'clock. And I got to tell you, you're not all that efficient. It's not worth it, Tim.
well, we're off the subject.
Usually after 10 o'clock, most of us don't function very well.
Can you pull,
Been up working all day? You know, most of us have been up working all day. So my feeling would be, you set a time, we've done it before, over the years, and if that time comes, then you just have another meeting that month.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to get that much stuff coming into the ZBA, I mean, let's face it, we're going to have more than one meeting. But this going to midnight and after just seems, well, to me, it's ridiculous.
I just checked with Luke. He gets up at 5. I'm up at 5:30. I am not efficient at midnight. I'm sorry. And I feel that my responsibility in my position on the board to the public, whether it's the applicant or it's whether to people that do not agree with the applicant, I don't feel I'm fulfilling that responsibility.
if you did have a second meeting, you'd have to notice that in the paper, right? Which means 2 weeks?
You continue it.
you
Continue.
open each case and continue the public hearing. Close it.
Ones you haven't heard, I think you have to renotice.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. What?
I think that if you don't take up a specific thing that night it was advertised, you have to re-advertise for it. I'll turn that to Tavis.
I've already come to the conclusion that if it looks like there's going to be a hot button coming before this board, I'm going to contact the chair and see if we can arrange a separate meeting that month. Doesn't change the deadlines. If you can be noticed for the first Monday, you can be noticed for the second or third Monday. There's not a lot of conflict on Monday nights. So I hate to say it, but the board might have to think about what the rain date is, should it be a busy schedule. And we'll just notice accordingly.
So one of the things that's pretty standard in the guidance document is that we shouldn't rush our decisions, and we need to take the time to hear people. And if we need to continue something to make a decision, that's what we should do. Personally, I don't have a preference whether we stay or we continue, but if we want to vote on that and then move on to the next thing. Does anybody else have anything they want to say about that?
I mean, I'll make a motion that we don't take any hearings after 10 o'clock at night. That
Second.
seems-
All in favor? All opposed? I abstain.
I think we can, looking at what Tavis was saying, I think we can try to avoid piling a lot of
abstained.
things in a meeting.
She abstained, I said no.
Three yes, 1 no, 1 abstain.
But I would like to point out that I am on another town board that does meet regularly on the second Monday of the month, and I think it's disrespectful if we have to have an additional meeting to put it on that same night. That's why meetings are scheduled for specific nights, specific days of the week, every month.
Okay. So we're probably looking at the second Monday, but I think
I'd
we can
prefer the
play that by
third.
ear. Third Monday?
Yeah, because I have a conflict on the second.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
The only conflict I see on the third Monday, and I don't know how consistent it is on the town calendar yet, is the Budget Committee.
So they meet Mondays and Thursdays.
I'm just saying, in August, they happen to be meeting on the third Monday. They are not in September.
We already have our meeting on the third Monday in September.
Right.
Correct, but there isn't one on the first.
Right, correct. Yeah.
So it might just be safe to have an as needed, and we'll see what we can coordinate. The likelihood of having 2 administrative appeals, 2 variances, and 2 special exceptions or more on one agenda, it was a first for me.
Also, like you said, we can waive that. Let's say we're just finishing one up and we've got something like the library sign sitting there. There's no reason we can't hear the next case if we feel like it's a quick one.
Yep.
Yeah.
If we have a waiver provision in the bylaw, then we do,
Okay,
just cause.
yep.
Yep.
The September meeting is the third Monday, the 20th. So.
Okay, are we all set with that then?
Yep.
So can we talk about the sites visits scheduling and noticing? Or is that something that should go in our rules of procedure?
Now, I'm just going to interject this. Now that I understand that the board would like to have a scheduled board site walk for every application it sees, I will simply add that to every notice going forward.
Yes,
That-
every sidewalk.
The only time that becomes interesting, and I would like some board feedback in it, do you want them to start at 6? Do you want to say what I understand is it used to be starting at 6 every 15 minutes, and it was jostled around for travel time.
I have no idea, because I wasn't here during that time period.
Okay, can I just have some input here? We always used to go to a site visit for every case that we were going to be hearing, and usually it was scheduled with the one farthest from the town hall first, working our way back with the idea that we would be done by 6:45 and everybody could just come here for the meeting then. Judging on how far away it is, you may need to allow more than 15 minutes between something that's, say, up in North Wolfeboro, if the next one is up on North Main Street someplace. We do usually start around 6-ish if there's only 2 or so, and then in the winter, we do them like at 4 o'clock because it's dark, and then we come back, for the meeting later.
And that system worked.
We also, we advertise, I'm sorry, Tim, I'm sorry.
No, I just said that, what Sarah said, I said that system worked, what she just stated.
We also advertise.
Yes,
We let the engineer know, we let the abutters know,
Travis said
and we
that.
let the public know. And the clerk takes notes, brief notes, and of those people in attendance. Sometimes, I think, Tim, you hand around a sheet for them to put their name down.
No, I've never been asked to do the people there, just the people from the board that attended.
And Tavis, you're welcome to come, but you don't have to because we don't make any important decisions. Those are made here. Questions should be general, but if you want to go have your supper and then come to the meeting, that's fine too. You're welcome.
But my only question is, when does winter begin?
When to what?
When does winter begin? When do the 4 o'clock site visits start?
Daylight savings, I guess.
when it gets dark.
Yeah, I was just going to say when it gets dark.
And there's still the opportunity to go individually, as I recall doing earlier, because I may not be able to make 4 o'clock site visit.
As long as 3 people attend, right?
That's
Only with a special exception.
Okay.
Yeah. Are we good?
That
I
works.
think we're good.
So I'm going to monitor all the applications that come in by the published application date. I'm going to see if it looks like a 1-meeting agenda or perhaps 2. I'll confirm with the chair, unless you want to do it with more people than that.
If I have questions, I might rope in some others, but sure.
And then we'll start at 6, unless it looks like it'll be dark, and then we'll start sooner.
Okay,
Now, there's nothing wrong if you can't make a site walk,
right.
unless it's a special exception.
But if you can't make it with the group, just go
You can
during the
still-
day if you can.
And it should be understood that if we can't make it, we should let the chairman or Tavis or both know that we can't make it to a meeting.
Tavis is only concerned on the special exceptions, because if there's something procedural that then changes the course of events for that evening, that needs to be known.
Yeah, special exception, according to our zoning ordinance, has to have 3. The others do not, but it's been our practice and policy to do that. And then you just add on your advertisement the one-liner about site visits.
With an approximate time, yes.
Yeah, the approximate time.
I think the question was if somebody can't come to the site visits or the evening, to make sure to let people know so that we're not waiting.
We're supposed to let the planner and the chairman know. And then that way, the alternate or somebody will make sure they get there to be the 3 people. If something happens, a blizzard or something, and there are 2 people show up because they're foolish, then that site visit doesn't happen because it'd be illegal. You got to have 3.
You know what would be handy? On all the other boards that I'm on, we have a list of members and phone numbers, and that's helpful for things like you have to cancel something in the spur of the moment, or something comes up weather-wise, but it's also handy, like if you were down there with only 2 people for a special exception, then you could call somebody on the cell phone and say, hey, we really need a 3rd person here. Maybe they weren't too enthusiastic about coming, but they would be, available if they knew that it was dependent.
Passing out a sign-out sheet, it will not get published on the web.
That's good.
I couldn't hear you.
We're making
passing around-
a contact list that I will
Oh,
send
good.
to each of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay? Packet distribution timeline. I have some questions about how early can we get those, earlier than we have been? Is it after the newspaper deadline has been sent? Can we have it shortly thereafter so that we have more time to review the cases?
Well, you do email it, right?
What did you say?
That he does email it before that Friday, I believe.
But if it goes in the newspaper 10 days in advance, I'm wondering if we can have it more than the Friday before the meeting.
I'll see what I can do.
Well, the minutes have to be out 5 days, not counting the weekend, so those are always done right away. And, if the other information has to be in before the newspaper, then it would seem like we could get at least a good, we know that sometimes people bring things to the meeting or just bring them in a day or 2 ahead, but the basic bones of the whole thing should be there already, I would think. Like even Thursday, if the packet comes out and we don't get a chance to look at it, if I have hazardous waste on the weekend, I might not get a chance to look at it, and that's my problem, I know, not yours. But then if I get the packet, then if I had a question, then I can't get a hold of you till Monday. If we get the packets out on Friday, and then that causes pressure on you to answer the question, it just would be, I think, easier for staff and members if we could get it a little further ahead.
Audrey, We had tried to strive to have the planner get it out by Wednesday before the Monday meeting. And sometimes that worked and sometimes it didn't, but definitely Thursday, no later than Thursday. And that was always Thursday. But we had hoped, when possible, it could be on Wednesday. So then the newspaper is legal notice is 12 days, I believe, 10 days not counting the day before and the day after for the newspaper.
14, not including legal holidays.
Yeah. So the other thing that this question would go to you, Tavis, is we don't treat an application like the planning board. We do not have to accept the application as complete. That's the planning board process. For some reason, we've got off track on that. You view the application, you or your staff view the application and determine if it's adequate enough to forward it. My understanding is that you can't not forward it. I don't know, that's what I've been told, that it would be the risk of the applicant. You would tell the applicant, you know, this really isn't got everything it needs. If I forward it for you, you stand the risk of a continuance, a denial without prejudice, and so forth. So I would recommend you fill in number 3. So there isn't that pressure on you like the planning board when you send over your recommendation that the application is complete because they've got all the plans and the maps and the engineering and all that. For the zoning board, it has to meet the criteria in our checklist, and then you send it to us. So I don't see why it can't come out on a Wednesday. Can you do that for us?
I don't know
Get
the
them out on
process, so I
Wednesday?
mean, I don't know how much we're asking
Does the
for.
board find anything helpful in the planner recommendation or the planning director's report to the board?
What? I'm sorry.
The piece I write, the director's commentary, if you will, does the board find any value in receiving that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I think that goes to the
That
next.
is typically the holdup with getting things out, just because every board wants that piece. So all the application deadlines are staggered, and planning board goes out this day, and so there's planning board packets and ZBA packets, and then all the regular things that go on. So as I understood it, the zoning board always got packets on Friday, if not sometimes Saturday. Tonight I'm hearing there was a push for Thursday, a push for Wednesday. Moving it up just adds more time sooner. So I can look at making that available. If it's, as to Sarah's point about making the bare bones, absolutely. I can scan in one of every application and make it available to you. Making all of the copies gets a bit redundant. The reason I asked about the planner's comments is really all I'm doing is saying this is what they're coming in for and this is what the section of the ordinance is.
Shouldn't that be on the denial that they get when they turn in their paperwork? They should have that in a denial.
That's why I'm asking the question. All I'm basically saying is here's the section that was used to deny a building permit or that triggered a special exception, read this section. All I'm quite literally doing, and most of it, is copying and pasting from the ordinance into a review and then putting the standard conditions in. I don't author the conditions, they've what the board has been receiving all along. And frankly, since I've been to this board, the board has never moved any of the conditions on to the action. So that's why I was asking. I was surprised to hear almost a unanimous yes, it's helpful to get this report when it almost seems to go unread. So
In the past, we used to make a stipulation that that was included.
Yeah.
The report, the planner's report was included with the
conditions.
application?
or the conditions.
Oh, the conditions. I think we're getting several pieces of paper mixed up here, or we're talking about them at the same time.
So just so people hear what happens, somebody comes running in by 4 o'clock or 2 o'clock with a pile of paper that is supposed to, make up the application. Someone has to go through and make sure that all of the boxes are filled, or, as I determined, if it comes down to it, enough information to answer the question. What I found with a recent application, I don't want to talk about it specifically, this board wanted a very complete site plan, when it was my opinion that the board didn't need a complete site plan to determine the special exception. But the board spent hours talking about things that were or were not missing.
You're probably never going to get that 100% right as to, you know, whether we think everything's in there. But the part about the section that they're asking for
Denied
relief
for
from,
this.
the denial,
Is on the form.
should be on the form.
I find it's helpful if, in his review, where he takes and pops into his review the specifics of the piece of zoning, because, like I said before, I have my book, which is 2013, and we don't, I know some sections have not changed, but others have, and so it's helpful for me to make sure that he has sent me the latest edition, revision, whatever, of 175, blah, blah, blah.
So can that just be on the denial also, just the section that goes with it?
Well, it doesn't
It
the,
is, but I think what I'm hearing is that Sarah goes back and looks at that section from 2013, as opposed to what might be.
Don't do that.
well, I don't have to, as long as I get the information in his review.
Right.
It's what I'm
Well,
saying, it's valuable.
I guess that goes on to, we should all have current zoning board adjustment books printed out with whatever sections have changed. I think we're asking for trouble if you're looking at a book that is terribly out of date.
Some of it's 2015, but, you know, it is. And that's why I find that his review, that has the specific wording in it, is very valuable.
Right, but that can be on the denial. It doesn't have to be on his review, meaning it's going to come in earlier, and he doesn't have to, that means our packet can come earlier because the
Right.
denial gets turned in by the applicant with their application.
Right, but sometimes it just refers to 175, blah, 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 and it doesn't have,
But it
That
can,
section
because staff makes
transferred.
that denial. Staff writes out the denial. They can just put the section on the denial in full form like you're asking for.
The problem I see happening, though, is it's denied for 175, 142B. Sarah's 142B might be different than Audrey, who looks online, that might be different than Luke, that has last year's printed out copy.
But if it's on the denial, that's the current one, right?
Amen, that's,
oh,
you know, 175, 114B3, deck too close to water, supposed to be 50. That's really all the review said, and then conditions on how you have to pay to record the notice of decision, you know, all of that sort of thing.
I think what we're hearing is, I mean, I know that even when Matt was here, we had asked him, Matt usually got us the packet Friday afternoon, at least for most of the time. It may have gotten pushed to Thursday later on, but on average, it was Friday afternoon, and even bled sometimes into Saturday morning when you'd be able to pick up your packet. I think what we're coming to with a exercise here is that, you know, we can either get the whole packet potentially still on Fridays, or we could get, you know, at least the cases with the denial earlier, and then as we move closer to the meeting, what you're saying, Tavis, is we could have the rest of it. Is that correct? Or if we wanted just to know what the cases are coming before us, this, you know, in October, for instance, you know, earlier that week we could have at least the cases, so we can start, you know, looking into it ourselves.
Well, the other thing I think that would be helpful for the board to remember is that all you're looking at a meeting is what the applicant turned in, and the public comment isn't public comment on their thoughts on something. If it's a variance, there's 5 criteria. The applicant says, here are my responses to the 5 criteria. So that's the plaintiff, if you will. And then the public gets to be the defendant and say, I don't think the 5 criteria have been met because of this, 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 and this. It's not how they feel about it, or that they're vexed that someone is asking for it.
Right.
And I would encourage everyone on the board to say, you know, Madam Chairman, we seem to be getting off the 5 criteria, because all you guys can do is the 5 criteria. Has the applicant met the test or not met the test? Or the 8 criteria for a special exception?
What's that got to do with the time frame of getting the application,
My point is, the only time the public gets to do that is at the hearing. My point is, everything the board is supposed to receive in order to open the public hearing is in the application form. Why it was denied, what they applied for, and how they addressed the criteria from the plaintiff's side.
right, it's all public information. Once you advertise that legally, the public can come in and look at the
They
application.
can come in and look at the file, and they can ask,
But what Luke is saying is you could give us that application, you could give us the denial, which the public would be able to see,
Yep.
but you haven't done your planner's review yet because you're running up against the clock. So what? So we get that on Friday. Give us everything else so we can start looking up our stuff.
I guess my concern is I'm hearing tonight that people are looking up the wrong stuff.
The what?
People are looking up the wrong stuff. It doesn't take long for me to say this was denied because of this.
Well, that's
Print it
our
out.
problem, not yours.
Print it on a piece of paper and highlight it. See denial.
Well, we have to have for someone to come here, they have to get denied. They just don't walk in.
It's part of the application.
So we have to have that piece of paper. We have to have the filled out application. Even if it's not complete, we should get it. And the thing we'd be waiting for is your comment, your memo cover page. And that you should be able to get to us Thursday or Friday. It certainly should come out not at 5 o'clock on Friday. And the other thing, I know there's a clock. You have, I think it's 30 days after someone comes in to hand you an application to set a schedule to meet with us. But there's time for you to get stuff to us and for you to do your part. You don't do the part of the code enforcement officer that does the denial. That's not yours. You hand that over to him and he goes through, I'm hoping he does his work himself. And
I would take objection to that.
It depends on what it
Tavis
is.
is his superior, so Tavis, I would think, would review that it's the right thing. Right, you're the zoning
Well, for
administrator.
example, the last case from the last meeting started with my denial of a shoreland permit. That was what they then appealed by applying for a variance. So sometimes I write them, sometimes the code officer writes them, it all depends on what's going on. Ultimately, I have to be responsible for the denial letter, as Audrey's saying, that the code officer writes. So we will talk about it and say, yeah, that's, I agree or I disagree, what are your thoughts on that? And then the denial is generated. What I learned from the last meeting is this board literally wants the form filled out as opposed to just saying this was the letter that was written substantiating the denial that was then appealed.
well, however you work it in your office is your business. But the thing of it is Luke has a suggestion and a point that I think could work, that leaves you space to get your work done. And the information is there for the public, so I mean, really, I could go in and just start looking at the application, but I would like it not have to, you don't want us walking in there and causing more commotion, so there's no reason why Wednesday or Thursday, we can't get the application, even if we don't get the denial in time. But we should have the denial by then because you need that so you know what you're going to be writing your planner's comments
You
on.
have to have a denial to even have an application. That's part of it. There's no
The
lag time.
applicant is required to turn in a denial with their application.
The what?
The applicant, part of their packet is a denial. They need to be denied, they need to turn in
They
something
get that first,
and be denied with a denial.
and then he fills out the application. So there's no reason then why we shouldn't be able to get that with
That's
the
right.
application.
I'm agreeing with you.
Okay.
But the denial comes first.
And then the last piece of the puzzle is to get the planner's review.
Right.
And if we go down the wrong path, looking up the wrong statute and going down looking up a special exception instead of a variance or something, that's our problem. We've wasted our time, not yours.
I would like the case files to be brought too, in case we have questions. Matt,
They come to every meeting.
oh, do they? I didn't know you brought them. I know Matt used to, and they came in handy.
There's nothing, just for the public, there's nothing magic in the case file. It's a copy literally of what every board member has, plus
No,
a
no,
copy.
I mean the historic file.
No.
Yes, the historic file, like Audrey asked at the last meeting, because I think there's a spot on the application that says, have you been denied a variance before? Are you in violation of any code or ordinance? I think that's on the application. And that's something that somebody has to look up, not us, and that would be you, look that up. Or even at the meeting, I could say, well, is this applicant grandfathered? Why do we have it in front of us if they're grandfathered?
Well, it's
So
interesting
those are
you-
things that you have to do your homework so you can tell us.
I will tell you, you will never see an application for something that hasn't been grandfathered or had a legal review, because you can't issue a building permit if there's an existing violation on the property. So you can't even get to the point of having a building permit denied if there's an existing violation on the property. You can't go back, and frankly, this board was quite interesting. The last one, I went down to the basement, I believe it was about 11:15 p.m. The board went through and found out there was no legal existing nonconformity, and yet you still processed and approved the variance. So I'm a bit confused on what we learned by going through the history of the files, but I would digress for a moment. Also, it's not relevant to the current question before the board whether something was granted a variance in the past before or not, because that would play into a whole different process on how it was reviewed. If there was a variance,
Yeah, I'm sorry to disagree, but it is relevant. If somebody has those steps to that house that was on the waterfront illegally, we can't legally issue an approved variance.
you just did.
Can we not go down this road?
No, because we
Let's
didn't
not go
know,
with
we couldn't
specifics,
determine,
okay?
if we couldn't determine, because the file
Suzanne,
came in 2 minutes.
Let's not relitigate that case at all. I do know that in the past, I've had general questions about the parcel that were answered from the file that weren't in the review, and nobody had thought to give me the information about. It could be a minor question, but once or twice, when Matt had the file, he was able to open it and say, yes, that whatever is there because of whatever. And that's the kind of information that has been helpful to me in the past with having the file there.
And we just did issue an yes vote for those people because we couldn't determine whether those steps were illegal or not. We didn't have time. It was 5 minutes to 12. Who's going to?
And it could have gone either way, and I really don't want the board to be in a place where we feel rushed to make a decision. That's like rule number one. We need to take the time to make the right decision. I know it takes a long time. There's a lot of conversation. It seems cut and dried to some people, but I think it's not cut and dried.
We have 30 days to make a decision. And sometimes maybe we should think about it.
Have we beat that horse to death yet?
Yes.
Thank you.
There's one more important thing that I
Sure.
want to bring up, because equally as important is getting the packet as soon as possible is, I think, for this board, what I feel anyways personally is that the planner's notes at the end where he gives the conditions and outlines, how we're going to make our motion, basically for me, I think that's critical too. And I think that, so getting the packet as soon as possible, much of it complete as possible, tempered with the fact that for me, Travis's notes are important because that's how I'm going to look. I'm going to review those, and when ultimately, if I have to make a motion, and I got to outline the criteria, it's all there for me. So that's a very important part, I feel.
I think I'm going to revise what the review includes. It's not of any value at the top to go through and recite the same thing that's in the legal notice, with the applicant and the date of the hearing and all of that precursor. I think I'll just revise it to put the relevant code section, and then I'm willing to try this out, draft an approval motion and a denial motion.
Perfect.
so that the board has some guidance text to either, I'm not going to put anything in saying, I recommend you approve, I recommend you deny, just here's the section, and if you ultimately reach a conclusion to approve, here's a clean motion.
What I'm getting from Luke, which I didn't understand before, was that, Luke, when you're looking at the planner's review to tell you what the steps of the process is for that hearing. If it's a variance, he's laid out the state law. If it's a special exception, he's laid out the 8 things. That's not what you're saying?
I'm looking at it so if I'm going to make a motion to approve this, what's nice is to have all the conditions, have the motion to approve or deny. I'm going to deny for this reason, based on RSA, whatever. And then the conditions, if I approve it, here are the conditions. They're all outlined so that we're not sitting here, because there's been a couple times where, we're thinking about potentially adding another condition. For instance, Eastern Propane, adding the credit card, removing the credit card thing and only using key fobs. Which is fine if the board decides to do that, but if we had all the conditions, and most of them are cookie cutter anyways, they're in almost every single one that we go through. So, but we can say, and with conditions 1 through 6 as noted on the planner's notes, and that's part of the motion. It's very, very simple. By the time we get to that, with some of these, and if it takes a long time, it's nice to be able to cut right to it and get it done.
I don't think the planner should be putting down the conditions, other than the ones that I've been beating the drum about, which were...
That's what Luke's talking about, and I think I had said something in the
that's
first
what I've got
couple of
handed
meetings, that those are...
Who doesn't know that sometimes? Maybe I don't remember one of them, because there are 4 of them. And it does no harm to put it down on a condition. We are allowed to do that, even though
Sure.
the state says it's a state law.
Okay, if you're more comfortable having that on everyone, I was just trying to make that piece of
I
paper
would
more
like to
simple.
continue the practice of putting these, I call them boilerplate conditions in. It's something that we've always done.
You can do that.
Thank you.
Sure.
That's what, you want to look at them?
So that means we need to read those out every time as well, right?
No, we usually make the motion to approve blah, 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 with conditions as notice on the planner's notice, A through B or 1
Okay.
through 6.
So
or
they're not
whatever.
read out at each...
You just refer to them.
Okay.
You don't have to read out
They're not
each
a
one.
mandate. They're not a mandate.
They are a mandate.
Well, they aren't, because there's, and I always get this mixed up, there's conditions precedent and conditions before and after. And these would be,
Well, there really isn't a subsequent for the ZBA.
there isn't what?
There's conditions precedent and conditions subsequent
Right, yeah, okay.
at the planning board level. So the planning board might have a motion to approve.
Well, we
site-
do too. We do that too. We've done that before. We have made a motion conditioned upon conditions that have to be done prior to getting the building permit, and then conditions that would be subsequent to that.
Right,
Which
but
would
that's
be,
never going to be on the pre-printed form, because those are conditions that we're applying individually to each case.
They come up after the testimony.
Right.
Yep.
I don't care either way. If you're more comfortable, if you guys are more comfortable having those boilerplate ones on there that are required anyway, let's put them
The
on
other
there.
thing that's in there is that, like, a variance or an approval is only good for 2 years. Heads up, your applicant, you just got approved, but if you don't do that within 2 years, there's a whole nother process.
But those are only on the planner's review, unless
No,
we read them.
This is something we have used for
Can I finish my
a decade.
sentence? That's on the planner's review. Unless we read them at the meeting, nobody is going to know that.
We have been doing this, like, this one is from 2016. It was an application, and the member was Hank Y., who I read, sorry to hear, he just passed. And we had our condition that we had made as a board, and then we added 1, 2, 3, 4.
And you read them out in the meeting?
Pardon?
You read them out in the meeting?
Well, we've done it both ways. We've either read them, or we'd say, I move to include the planner's conditions 1 through 4 as stated. Sometimes I would say.
So that
the board-
goes on the notice of decision then, those conditions?
Yes.
That's how they find out? Okay, got it.
Does the applicant get a copy of that?
Then on the notice of decision eventually?
Yeah, the applicant gets a copy, and it would be in the notice of decision.
And
Can I
that gets
ask a-
recorded.
Perfect.
Can I ask a question about notices of decisions? I see them for the town of Tuftonboro and other towns in the paper all the time, and we don't seem to be putting it in the paper anymore.
No, there's no requirement to put a notice of decision in the paper.
We should be putting it online, though, I think.
No, a lot of towns do it, and we used to do it, and it's only a little ad. It's not expensive. We always put the notice of decision. The planning board used to, too. I'm sorry not to see that anymore, but it hasn't been for a while. But we always put our notice of decision in. It's the only way people know. It's not like just because we all know, and it was on TV, people pick up the local paper, and there's no time frame for that. That can go in, 2 weeks after. But we should be doing that, too. It's a matter of just informing the public. It would, hey, we approved 3, we denied 1.
I think this might go in a bigger discussion with what is going to go online and how things are going to be accessible to both the board and the people and the citizens. Now that we have an IT person, maybe we can have some kind of regular protocol that describes this stuff.
If the board wants the notice of decision posted online, that's easy to do.
I think that would make a lot of
If
sense.
the board wants to have it in the paper, we're going to need to add another notice fee to every application to put that in the paper.
I think with the advent of us having an IT person when we know stuff is going to get up there, that we could try that instead of spending the money first off and see if that makes any difference.
Part of
That's my
the
opinion.
question is it a list of the projects with approved or denied, or is it the actual notice of decision letter that was published?
My preference would be to have in the historic dates of the meeting, each meeting, all the paperwork and the notice of decision and everything else under each meeting date and applicant's name, so that it's all there. That would be my preference.
I brought up the discussion about the decisions. I'm happy if it's online. Right now, you can't find it anywheres. But if it could reliably show up online so someone could check and get the information, then it might be redundant to put it in the paper, because we do have to remember that that paper comes out once a week, and I can tell you for a fact, I can't even get them to put my hazardous waste notices in reliably once a month. So I suppose if you pay for the notice, you have a much better chance, but a lot of, nowadays, a lot of people don't even get the papers. So online, they're used to going online to look for minutes and notices and agendas, and perhaps that is the most logical place to put it,
And everybody has access, but not everybody gets the paper.
Right, not everybody has
That's the best place
access.
to put it, just a decision, I think just a decision and why.
And I quite honestly have never been asked by anyone what the decision of the zoning board was, or never been asked to see a copy of a notice of decision, other than an instance where an abutter is
Yeah,
opposed to the decision, and then they want a copy of everything. So putting the entire application, plus the plan review, plus the notice of decision, plus the notice that was sent to the paper and everything online is a giant time suck. And I hate to be blunt about it for the amount of time that people actually look at it. Frankly, for none of the applications since I've been in Wolfeboro have any of the public even come to look at the files, much less look for the notice after the fact. Not to say they're not interested, but it's not, I don't want the board to think that people are reading something in the paper and then coming and digesting all of the information in the file well ahead of the board.
Yeah, I think it's hard to make a general assumption about the public looking at things right now, because I think there is still a pandemic reluctance to go two public buildings.
I wasn't speaking only of Wolfeboro. I was speaking in
okay.
20 years.
But,
What goes in the paper is similar to what goes in for the legal notice, case number, the section number, and then it say,
Approved with
Approved and
condition
denied.
denied. Yep.
yeah.
yeah. And the time that you see that this will come up will be, people will make generalizations, usually around March, voting time. They'll say, well, the ZBA never approves anything, or the planning board never approves anything. And it might be a good education tool to say, well, if you go back and look online, you will see that there were 14 cases, 2 were denied, 12 were approved. Because that's come up with candidates before.
No, it really was off subject, so
I want to hear it.
it was off subject. No, it was just something I saw here and now.
I guess as we go forward with the IT guy, I would like to look at what kind of things we can get online and reasonably, because that paperwork filters in and out and off of everybody's desk. Lots of times it's already scanned. Maybe it's not, you've got that, you've got that. Or it has to be copied, which is essentially the same thing as scanning it.
If David Ford can put on what he puts online, then maybe we could too. I mean, he puts maps, he puts his whole packet online. I'm sure we could
So-
elaborate.
A lot of places do.
Would the zoning board like me to add an electronic submission as a requirement?
Oh,
No.
that's up to you, but I don't know why you don't already. I mean, that's an administrative thing, but you should be asking for an electronic submission, absolutely.
Well, frankly, I don't need the paper ever, other than to keep one file in the basement forever. Making 8
know.
copies to come to a meeting is,
I think it's good to make it available, but I don't think you should exclude people that aren't able to do that for whatever reason.
That's true. If you have some people that don't have, you can go to the library and get it scanned. We're really talking about the bigger projects, not the 2-page.
no, where it becomes cumbersome, it's not the original application of the plan review. That's easy enough. Most of it's generated on a computer anyway, so you just build a PDF that way. Where it becomes more cumbersome, if the board asks for new materials, then you've got to go amend everything that's online. That's where the time builds. And the website that we have, it's not the IT person. The IT person really isn't tasked with putting things online. It's more about making sure online works. It's easy enough to drag and drop on the website and add materials.
Well, that's an administrative flow process, which, I don't want to tell you guys how to do your business. I'm just saying what I'd like to see, and
Yeah, so far, to my
however that
knowledge,
works.
nobody puts the entire application process for anything online here.
right. Of course, we haven't had an online for all that long, so things progress and get better and change over time. Anything else for that?
Clear.
Okay, communications and miscellaneous. I think we've already talked again about how we would like copies of anything that goes, any question to the town attorney would like an email copy of the question and the answer.
Yeah, I'd like,
To that, does the board want any individual to be able to authorize me to ask the attorney a question? Or does the board want to reach a conclusion they believe needs to go to town council? Because there is an expenditure of funds when you do that.
Well, you know what it is? No one person on a board has any authority, so I don't think,
Should be a majority
and it is a
vote.
cost to the town, so I think if a member of the board has a feeling that we have a question that needs to go to town attorney,
You need to
we
ask
should
it at the
discuss
board.
it.
Should it be a majority vote or unanimous?
Well, I don't think we have to take a vote on it. I think it's usually would just
No, no,
consensus.
wait,
Oh, I'm
to
sorry.
ask-
I can't hear you because you're not close enough to your
To
mic.
ask the attorney to say, I want to send this out to an attorney, should the board vote to do that be unanimous or majority?
I think majority would cover it.
I think majority, too.
Yeah, because we usually just do it by consensus. We don't usually even just vote. It's,
I
we can make it that
think we
formal.
should have more access to the attorney and be able to not be afraid of passing a question to her, because the cost of getting something wrong is very high.
That's true, and we can use municipal association for questions as well.
That's true. If it's not connected to a specific case, we can, and that might do well for some questions. But if it's connected to a specific case, we can't do that.
Right. But sometimes, you know, if it's a general question, we pay a membership, and that's one of the
Absolutely.
services, so.
Yeah.
So general questions can be raised by any member, and I will process them through NHMA, and then if
That's
it's
what I was
money,
going
it's a
to
board.
ask, is if we had a question in between sessions, how about we direct it in writing to Audrey, who directs it to you?
Is this for municipal association or for the attorney?
The attorney.
Well, you know, if we have a question about something, it would make sense, it sounds like it would make sense for us all to discuss what our question is and why we're questioning it, because instead of us, asking one thing and then it makes somebody else want to have a follow-up question, then we get this, kind of never-ending cycle.
In the 5 years of serving on Wolfeboro's board, I think the attorney's been in maybe twice.
Well, I think that's a problem, frankly.
I don't see it as an issue.
The only thing
I have seen issues because I've seen things go to court that maybe could have been answered by the town attorney.
In Wolfeboro?
No, because I only just started here, but I've been working with ZBAs for not as long as you, but for 15 years, so yes. I just think to get a quick answer and not go down a legally shaky road is really important.
If you get into a situation like that, it's warranted, but I've only seen that happen twice here. My comment is it's a rare occasion.
The one thing that I care about regarding questions to the attorney is that the question that you ask in writing is returned to us with the answer. The answer is always in the question. Sometimes we get the answer without the question. So I would ask that we get the question with the answer.
Well, I think what I'm hearing is the board, prior to going to town council, is going to author its own question, agree upon its language, and then request a response.
That makes a really good sense, actually, yeah. Because it might be, we might have a question and there might be two follow-up questions, like in the questions.
As far as general, I don't want to say legal questions, but general questions on process or otherwise, I don't think Suzanne, for example, needs to send it to Audrey to send it to me. You send me what your question is, I will respond to the group, because that's not a meeting.
Yeah, yeah.
Receive the following question.
And if I were to send Audrey a question, not necessarily about the application for a variance, but did you get your packet on Thursday? Or did you get your packet on Friday? Just a general process question. That's not a violation, but what I do is, because I'm not talking about the case, but what I've always done, and there's never been a complaint, is I will send it to your office, because your office is the brain. That's where everything's stored. And, or if I ask you a question, she's the chairman. I want her to know where my head is on this particular thing. I will send it to her and to you, and it's not a violation because it's stored for public inspection.
Okay. Suzanne, were you on a timeline?
I gotta go.
So, okay. I mean, I guess,
I hate to, but I have a call coming in at 8:30 that I have to take. I'm gonna just make it.
now I guess I don't know how to handle the minute question, because my guess is you have some things you would like to say in the minutes, and if we do it without you, which we could because we have a quorum, you won't get to pitch in.
Just for the record, while you're thinking about it, there's actually no statutory requirement to approve minutes. So you can put them off to a later date.
I know.
And to that end, any suggestions or comments the board members have don't actually have to change what the actual minutes are, because the minute taker is the one that heard the meeting.
Say that again?
I don't believe the zoning board has the ability to force the minutes to be changed.
Oh, we take a vote on amended minutes.
You do, you don't have to.
The purpose of the minutes is to uphold whatever decision we made, and therefore we review what we said to make sure what we said is what we said.
Right.
And therefore we can ask for those to be reflective of what we said.
Correct. I'm only mentioning it because not this board specifically, but other boards I've had experience was something might, I'll just pick on you because you're chair. You know, the minutes reflect Audrey Klein, paragraph after paragraph. Audrey reads it and then goes, well, that's not quite what I meant to say. That's where it gets a little dicey.
What you meant doesn't matter.
That's my point.
Right. But
For example,
there's recordings,
there was
so-
a recent notice of
Yeah.
decision where it was very clear on the key fobs, for example. Retail wasn't discussed, key fobs was, so that needed to be a deeper dive.
So I would say that in deference to Suzanne, we not do the minutes, but I do want to have a general conversation about the minutes.
Well, we can postpone them till the next time,
Yes.
so.
But going along with my comment about the purpose for the minutes, which is to uphold whatever decision we make, I find especially really good job with the recording and copying down some very verbatim things, but I find that some of the statements of the board are not as complete as I would like them to be, whereas a lot of the statements of the applicant and the abutters are verbatim. And I guess my feeling is they don't have an opportunity to say, you know, that's not what I said. And so I think it might be more helpful for us to encapsulate what they said in a general way and then count on whatever it is they turn in writing, because that's what they've submitted, rather than take the chance that they've been misquoted off of the recording in a very detailed way, since there's no way for them to change that. And I guess that's what my feeling is.
And the last meeting was very interesting because a lot of people had pre-printed statements that then had notes on them. And as I was following along, some of them turned them in before they started. And what they said was neither, not what was pre-printed or annotated.
And we're not required to write down exactly what they say.
Correct.
You know, what they turn in is exactly what they say. What the applicant puts on their application is exactly what they say. But it's not the minutes are the board's minutes. They're supposed to be there to uphold whatever information. We have 200 pieces of information. I've picked out 4 that I think are relevant, and I speak to those in my decision. Those are the ones that are most important to get in the minutes, not the 300 that were put out there.
Oh, I want to compliment her on the fact that she does a very good job.
Very thorough.
Detailed, and I just want to thank her. I see what you're saying. You're looking at having a little bit of a condensation of that information and making sure that the points that the board makes to make their decision are clear.
That's the most important thing of the whole minutes, yes.
if we don't have a thorough record and that a judge can determine how we got to where we got, he's going to remand it back. So it's difficult for whoever takes the minutes to determine what goes in and what doesn't go in. What we've been getting is practically verbatim. But I have a question on this last set of page 8 and 9.
Suzanne, but we're not doing the minutes. I mean, if we're going
Well,
to
we're
do the minutes.
talking about what goes in the minutes?
Yeah,
What goes in the minutes we're talking about?
okay, not specifically something you said.
Well, no, I'm not talking.
Okay.
I just want to know who put the objection raised have been 1 through 4, and then somebody encapsulated addressing each objective 1 through 21.
If you look on the previous page, it's that same speaker, because I looked at that myself.
You what?
Go back to the previous page.
Yeah?
It's the same speaker.
It's a speaker said
It's
that?
the same speaker. It's just a continuation of what they were saying.
Right.
And in reference to verbatim, there's the video recording, which
Well,
covers everything.
When people hand in a letter,
Yeah.
and you always are good about asking, would you give it to the,
If they want it recorded, they need to hand it in, because
It
we're
should be-
not, first of all, apparently we don't own the videos.
It should be
And two, if we
attached.
do we keep them in for how long? And I don't know what the process is for that. I don't think there is one
it should be
yet.
attached to the minutes, that's all I have
And
to
it
say.
needs to be attached to the minutes.
It's a public record, it's part of the minutes, it should be attached to the minutes.
In the good old days, they sometimes had a tape recorder, which they would use to help them make the minutes after scribbling the shorthand, and then the tape would go bye-bye, and you'd only have the minutes. But in today's world, there's a whole different process. I don't know what it is in Wolfeboro, how long we keep the recordings, do we own the recordings?
I don't think the statute lets you get rid
No,
of electronic
no, this
recording.
would just be an administrative decision, like, how are we going to handle this, and so that we know what we can expect.
So, for example, just before Suzanne leaves, she can hear me as she goes through the door. The online version of the online posted 6:23:21, or sorry, the 7:19 minutes, because there were so many things turned in, there was a sheet at the end added that said all submitted statements are in the project file, as opposed
saw
to
that.
appending them to
Yep.
the actual minutes.
And that satisfies requirements of giving the information to the town clerk?
Yes,
It does.
because really the project file is the record. If there's ever an appeal, someone is going to take that entire file, which is
Yep.
from the denial letter through the application to everything, what was posted, how it was posted, copies of the certified return receipts from all the abutters, all of that is part of the file. So the culmination of the minutes. Something that's unique about the zoning board is courts often rely upon the whole discussion in the minutes, as opposed to at the end saying, I motion second on condition number 1 having been satisfied for the following reasons. You don't have to make,
So the court looks at initially 2 things. 1, did we do the process right? And 2, did we make a reasonable decision? And that's what
Based
they're
on-
looking
right.
at. Was the decision reasonable? Did we have enough information to make the decision? And was it reasonable, as in, if we didn't want somebody to have a house, but it was in the residential district where they're allowed, that's not reasonable. So but they're looking at the elements that we say and speak and put in the record as important.
right.
I've read a lot of cases. They're very difficult. So that was just my general, I guess I have, my request is that we have more detail in the board's decision points. And I suggest that we have a lot less detail in public input and rely on what they've turned in with a general synopsis, a couple of sentences that says what they talked about. And then I would say let's wait on the minutes until we have a full board to review those, especially the last cases.
Can we get back to one of my earlier questions?
Sure.
Okay. It's double. Back to flow charts, which we have in here. which may need updating, especially updating from my
I
version.
hate to say it, but I actually made those.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not surprised. Anyway, then the thing that I never quite understand is the flow of who actually gets things to the newspaper. Is it Terry? Is it Tavis? Is it Mary Jane? Or does Mary Jane just do the minutes here from the meetings?
All of the application materials get received by Terry,
Terry,
or the admin person. One of the things I'm working on with her is, instead of recreating what goes in the paper and goes in the abutters notice and goes on the agenda, is have Tavis look at it once, come up with the appropriate language, and then copy and paste it over to the other two pieces.
okay, 'cause-
One of the things I'm used to doing is taking all of the notices that go to the paper, quite literally, the notice that goes to the paper, then just gets copied for every abutters notice. I've heard Wolfeboroites don't like that. They only want to know about what case they're getting an abutter notice for, as opposed to having 4 cases listed. Part of me wants to just say, okay, 15 of them need to have this highlighted, 15 of them need to have that highlighted, but let's get over it. Because we're custom tailoring abutters notices based on what's on the newspaper. So it's another manual touch of the information and a chance for, what was it, 3329 to turn into 3328, because there was a mistype of information.
Right.
Some of it's procedural defects, some of it's close enough. The things we can't control is when we send something to the paper that says ZBA,
And
public notice, and it says
Planning board.
and then ZBA. And I've had less issue using the non-local paper, but it's almost anti-Christian, if you will, to leave the Granite State News.
That's because very few people get the other paper.
Well, there's also no requirement, I don't believe anymore, to use the paper.
There is for the ZBA.
It's still there,
Yeah, it must be in a paper of common circulation, which,
which is many papers, but they intend it to mean Granite State.
I think most people would consider that the primary one around here, yes.
and then, I guess my other question, one of them was answered.
Are you going to need a motion to move the minutes to the next meeting?
I don't think so,
Okay.
do we?
No? Okay,
Decide you're not going to do it, and it'll carry on.
perfect.
Can we talk about the handbook?
I just sent the board members the newest one. If people want individual copies, we can probably,
Not this, he's talking about the NHMA handbook.
Oh, no, I
She's
have
talking
one
about
of,
this.
I have one of the, oh, she took it with her. I have one of the ones from state of New Hampshire.
Right.
I'm talking about the local one.
So what I would like to do before we do anything is find out from the IT guy whether he can print that with page numbers and table of contents. Because
where is it and what is it?
the zoning board, the zoning, the whole zoning, right?
Yeah. Well, this has, we
I
have
can
a
just
section,
stick it in the copier and make 8 copies, if that's what the
we
board
have
wants.
rules of procedure, which we're working on. ZBA, Board of Adjustment, there was some information gleaned from, well, it's going to be September 18th this year.
We have a March 2020 on that.
Yeah. And there's updates for the legal decisions, and in September 18th, the Land Use Law Conference is virtual, but that's my hazardous waste day from 6:30 in the morning till 5:30 at night, so I won't see it unless they tape it or something.
Probably will.
Yeah, they're all taped. All the classes on there are on their website, and you can go and pick them out class by class afterwards.
Okay. Then the current zoning ordinance, and then in the back was the application for variance, our updated forms, and, you know, equitable waivers for appeals, special exceptions, and in each one, there was a little flow chart that was primarily to help educate the public. It said, you know, pre-application, this is what you do, this is what happens, you have to send more information or not, or whatnot, which was helpful. But anyway,
What did you want, what did you want, did you want something different than this?
I wanted an updated one,
Updated?
because mine is woefully behind the times, because there have been zoning changes which are not reflected in this
Yes.
old information that I have. Some things have not changed, but some sections
So
have.
my comment was that right now, the last one I have is printed off E-code 360, which has no page numbers and no table of contents, and as I mentioned in the last hearing, I hate it.
Well, God forbid you drop it if it's got no page numbers.
It's awful, but I know that Matt had sent me the previous one in a PDF that had table of contents and page numbers, and the address on that, I believe, is the draft copy of the E-code. So I think that somewhere that E-code is in a different format before it gets uploaded to the website that is exactly the same, but has the page numbers and the table of contents.
Anyone can go onto the online code and download it as Word or PDF. And
It doesn't download with a table of contents and page numbers. It just downloads the way that Terry gave me, which is why I have all these tabs, because there's no way to find stuff because there's no table of contents. At least she told me this was the only way that she could give it to me. Now, maybe that's not right, but I would love to have one that is more functional. And before you make one for Sarah, see if you can find out what that is, because working with this one is very difficult, especially in a
We used
meeting.
to all have them. All members.
That's right, yep. Well, Rob used to keep them on his computer before there was a way to put them online, and so they were all PDFs, and there was a table of
Well,
contents.
you know, I do a lot of my prepping for meetings while I'm riding in the van, while Dale and I are driving an hour to work and an hour back, and that's not handy for me to look at this stuff on the computer.
Right. Well, I don't like E-code 360 anyway.
So,
It's awful, but
do you literally want the entire ordinance?
that's what's in here.
500 pages of ordinance?
So you're looking at the site plan stuff also?
I'm starting with Article 1 with animals and running at large.
Okay, no, I'm just talking about zoning.
Okay, that's why there's no
Zoning.
table of contents.
Because why?
Because you only printed the zoning section, so that's only one article. That's just 175.
But it should have pages for each section. Like when she printed it out, there should be pages and table of contents. Anyway,
Let me see what I can do for you.
that would be great, thank you.
I think it would be too difficult to try to just pick out the pages that are changed.
No, no.
Yeah, don't do
That's
that.
not going to work,
Simply doing that is why there are probably 8 different books around the building.
right?
Because Matt never did the slip sheet, Rob did half of them, and then Matt caught up with some of them, but not in all 3 books. So,
Well, when I first started here, we didn't have anything on the computer, and we had a hard copy zoning book, and every time we had the march,
Opened it up and
town
slip
clerk
sheet.
came with certain pages, and we put it in there, the ones that were changed.
Yeah.
So it was manually kept up to date.
Can't be any more cumbersome than the budget books,
Oh, I'm sure,
which get updated frequently during the process.
right.
and for example, if you look up certain things now, if you were to look up parking regulations, E-code actually breaks it out. Is it in the book or is it a new law that's pending? Currently, all of last year's amendments, including the site plan regulation changes, are on hold because the selectmen are working on some other sections of the book. So until the clerk has all the pieces, E-code isn't going to be updated. We might even be at March and making more changes by the time we have.
Yeah,
Is there a way to get an electronic copy of that in a PDF? Because then you can just scan the file for what you're looking for.
Yeah, I was actually just going to play with it tomorrow and download the whole thing, and then say, here's the relevant section.
It would point to where you need to go, yeah, without reprinting.
Do you want me to send you what Matt sent me so you can see how that was laid out? And
Sure, I might
I
even be
don't,
able to
I
tell
thought
you
it was
before you find it.
interesting, in the bottom of the page, it gave the address, the web address of what he had, where he had printed that off. And I think it said something like Eco Draft Admin or something like that.
And that might be the proof they send back after they incorporate everything.
Exactly.
Right. So the one you have from Matt is going to be the most current because.
Oh, no, it's not, because that's 3 years old.
Anything else?
Luke? You have
No, I'm
anything
good,
to bring
thank
up?
you.
Tim?
Good?
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.